Welcome to the Trend Detection Podcast, powered by Siemens. And now your host, Niall Sullivan.
So welcome to this episode of the Trend Detection Podcast. I'm really pleased to have my colleague, Natalie Kurgan, on today, who's been on a few times before, I think, as well. It might have been a little while. Well, actually, you did another podcast with our colleague Kurgan as well, which was great. But today it's quite an unusual one because Natalie actually approached me with a topic, and I wasn't badgering her to come on the podcast. So I'll just let Natalie introduce herself, then we'll go into the topic. So today we're sort of talking about misconception about Senseye Predictive Maintenance, and I guess maybe a bit broader than that as well, predictive maintenance as a whole. But yeah, first of all, Natalie, I'll hand over to you just to introduce yourself.
Sure, thanks, Niall. So I'm Natalie. I am in the delivery team for Senseye Predictive Maintenance. So I work directly with customers, getting them onboarded pretty much from the time the PO is signed until their steady state. It's me working with them. And I'm also the delivery training lead. So anyone else in Siemens who is delivering Senseye will be looking over material that I've had a hand in curating. So that actually kind of answers your question, Niall, about why I wanted to do this podcast.
Yes.
So the title, Misconceptions about Senseye and about predictive maintenance in general. I've worked with a lot of customers and a lot of people, and I've been to conferences, and it just seems like there are some things that are generally confusing to everybody. And I just see the same questions going around and the same misconceptions going around. So I thought we should just address them.
No, exactly. And I guess the other thing, I mean, from a general market perspective, a lot more vendors, I guess, are saying they do predictive maintenance. I remember walking around an exhibition in the UK last year, and just the sheer amount of people saying they do predictive maintenance versus whether they actually do predictive maintenance. Obviously, I don't know these products inside out, but I suspect a lot of them have just taken this term and now using it as a marketing ploy. I mean, would you agree with that, I guess, as a first statement?
Yeah. 2 or 3 years ago, I was at a conference and it was just everywhere. Everyone is saying, we do predictive maintenance and we do predictive maintenance. And I think the first misconception is Senseye and all the other tools out there, we are just tools. Predictive maintenance is a strategy. It's not a tool. So it's really about how do you use this tool? Are you using it as part of your wider predictive maintenance strategy? Nothing can do predictive maintenance for you. It can just provide you insights prior to something actually failing.
Yeah, and I've actually on that topic, the fact you mentioned a tool is quite interesting because I've spoken to a customer of ours who describes Senseye as like a tool in their toolbox. So if they see an issue, then they'll open their toolbox and go, "Oh, should I look at Senseye or should I use a different tool in my toolbox?" So, which I thought was quite a nice analogy for it as well.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant because there are some things, there are other misconceptions like that Senseye in particular should be detecting. And I've literally had people say this to me, unpredictable failures. I'm like, well, how do you want us to predict unpredictable failures? That doesn't make sense. That means it's a spontaneous failure that doesn't show up in condition indicators. It doesn't show up in your data until it's broken. And that sort of thing is just really not for Senseye, but I'm sure it is for other tools like SCADA systems and alarming systems. So a tool in the toolbox sounds pretty good.
And actually on that topic, unpredictable maintenance, I don't know if that has a ring to it or not, maybe adjust our marketing. But how often does that sort of occur, that kind of, do you come across that? Is that quite a common thing or?
Well, we do, there's always going to be things that aren't quite predictable. So this is a multi-step question, Niall. So the first thing that we do when we're onboarding assets is we do want to take that into consideration is what data do you have for this asset and what condition indicators can we derive from that data? So a condition indicator will be something where you can understand the health of a particular aspect of a machine by looking at that data. But there are things that, if you only have, let's say, 3 condition indicators, that might not cover every aspect of a machine's health. So we've had people come to us and say, hey, our machine failed. Why didn't Senseye tell us anything? We go and look, and it's because there's literally nothing in the data that is available to Senseye. if you can't see it with your eyes, the algorithms aren't going to find something that's not there. So that's one thing, and that kind of seems like a spontaneous failure. If we had a condition indicator for that type of failure, maybe we could have predicted it. But there are other things. I remember we were in like a packaging area of a line, and they have all these little suction cups that hold like a bag. They just fall out randomly. It's not even worth monitoring because you just pop it back in. So I don't think there's any way to know if it's going to fall out.
And that reminds me of, I think it might have been yourself actually mentioned this on a previous podcast. Like, you don't monitor where, light bulbs, for example, because it's like you just change the light bulb, don't you? It's that kind of thing, isn't it?
Exactly. You don't need a predictive maintenance strategy for every piece of machinery. I don't know if we call a light bulb a machine, but we don't need it for everything. So we have to go through kind of a selection process to see where can the value be had.
And is there maybe a misunderstanding from a customer side about what type of assets they want to monitor? When you're talking to them, is it like, I have these assets, these ones I must have in mind to monitor?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, just a call this morning, I had a question about this. Every time we start, conversation with a new customer, they have use cases and they want to onboard their single most complex piece of machinery that fails all the time. Of course, it's a pain for them. But the thing is, they don't know how Senseye works yet. So they're not really going to be able to help us in discussions to figure out how to monitor the thing if they don't understand what Senseye needs to see. And we don't understand their machine. So it's very difficult to start that way. Instead, I like to say, let's start simple. Start with a relatively simple asset, a valve, a simple motor, something that you have a lot of too. If you have a big license, just get a whole bunch of motors in. They're all configured basically the same in the app. And then let your people see what the data looks like, understand the insights from Senseye, and then let's go back and tackle the difficult ones. That way, while we're spending time figuring out these tough assets, the app is generating value on the simpler ones.
Yeah, I guess it's quite natural that you would go down that line, wouldn't you? Because it's like, right, we've got this piece of software which we want to cover our most critical assets, even if it's just one, and it's almost. I know we're not supposed to use that word insurance because that creates legal problems, I think, potentially. But maybe that's the way customers think about it. Sometimes it's like, it's an insurance policy. I'm putting on my one key asset that keeps breaking all the time. Then I've got that insurance policy. Maybe that's the way they approach it rather than the scale factor, like monitoring lots of, all machines,
We definitely see that for sure. And the thing is, if you have condition indicator data for that machine, you can just have someone looking at the data periodically and seeing the same things that the algorithms will see. The point of the app is that it can do it at scale there's onboarding effort, but once it's steady state, it just runs. So they're much better off getting in loads of the simpler assets that nobody has to think about again. Or even assets that, even if you just have one thing you're monitoring, that might save someone a trip on a round, save someone a little bit of time.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I guess that's what part of your job, isn't it? To identify these, get them thinking in a slightly different way about it. Would you say that's the most common approach? I know we've sort of covered that a little bit, but the most common approach is to go that way, and you're having to do a lot of sort of education on the topic.
Yeah, I would say so. There has to be, like you said, a lot of education because they don't quite know what Senseye needs and what it is. They think they know what it is, which is a different thing, but they might not be quite right. So, yeah, I would say in the beginning, a lot of it is, in our role, is spent kind of gently steering our customers down the right track. Because 9 times out of 10, they come in wanting their most complex, problematic machines onboarded. And they think, we want five assets added to Senseye. And we're thinking, why? The app is actually brilliant for doing things at scale, not just for monitoring, but onboarding. So if you have one motor that you want to onboard, it will be the same effort to onboard it and configure it as onboarding 100 of those motors or 1,000 of those motors. They're all the same. We can do all the off-state removal, all the configuration in bulk. So you might as well get them all in.
And actually, because you mentioned, onboarding of assets, I thought I'd link it to your. So I'm just looking at your list here of misconceptions, and this idea of having asset templates where it tells you exactly the data you need for each asset type. So maybe that's a good link to that, Natalie, and you can expand on that.
Yeah, that's something else that a lot of people ask is, do you have templates? What do we need for these assets? And we don't, because every person, even if 4 different sites all use the same type of motor, it doesn't mean they're using it in the same way. The operating conditions are different. The available data might be different. So the failure modes they're looking to detect might be different. So we really take each customer by the hand and have them, basically what we need to know is, what do you want to see? What do you want to see for this motor, for this fan, for this gearbox, whatever it is? So we have some general guidelines, but we don't have templates because we don't want people thinking, oh, I don't have all that data, I can't use Senseye. And that's just not true. We'll take the bare minimum, as long as there's an understanding that we're not going to capture every failure event just with the bare minimum. But it's a place to start.
Yeah, I guess it's the same thing. It's like, can we just use your motor algorithm to get started, kind of thing? It's like just out of the box, and we just apply it to this to all motors and this to all fans and this to all.
Yeah,
it doesn't work.
Right. That's a good point. A lot of people think we make. I use this word, the model. The way most people think of AI and predictive maintenance, they're thinking sort of this antiquated idea of a data science model. And that is not what Senseye is doing. Senseye has no concept of what an asset is. It doesn't even know what type of data you're providing. All it knows is you are providing condition indicator data. So what that means is your data is steady, flat when the machine is healthy, and when it's not healthy, it's doing something else. And those are its 2 states, right? Healthy, not healthy. Obviously, that's not always the case, which is why we configure and we filter and whatnot. But that's what a condition indicator is. That's all Senseye needs. All it's doing is change detection. So it's learning from each data stream on its own, seeing what normal might be for that data, and then telling you when it starts shifting. It doesn't tell you every little thing that happens with each measure or with each asset, because that would be a ton of alerts. But instead it kind of accrues them all in its attention engine is what it's called. So that way you're not getting just millions of alerts on every single little change. And then you can also look at one asset compared to other assets of its same type. Again, Senseye doesn't understand what these assets are. It just knows that they should all basically be doing the same thing at the same time. And if one isn't, it can tell you.
And I guess another aspect to this as well is not just the data from an asset, but it's also, as we take on board sort of the feedback from maintainers as well. The people who've got their hands on the machines as well. What sort of role does that, I guess, play into things as well? Because people might not be aware of that fact, or presume that, it's just the magic box or the magic software box that's doing everything. But there is a place for human interaction as well, right?
Yeah, you'd be surprised how many times we'll have customers come to us and say, why did we get all these alerts? We were just in a startup period. The app shouldn't be telling us that. And we say, well, did you tell the app you were in a shutdown or in a startup period? No. How can it know? So you have to tell it this context. Otherwise, it's just going to see changes in the data and it's going to alert you to them. So we have different ways of doing that. For like a planned shutdown, you would use scheduled downtime, which just tells the algorithms just ignore the data for right now. Don't learn from it either. So don't alert and don't learn. We also have maintenance events, and as needed, we can apply relearning. Let's say you change out a whole motor, all the data is completely different than it was before. You might use a relearning event to just start the algorithms fresh on that new data.
Please like and subscribe on all major podcast channels, and find out more about Senseye Predictive Maintenance at Siemens.com.